YouTube, as always, please subscribe to the channel, like the video and share it if you can. Also, please feel free to comment down below. Let us know what you think of what we're talking about. All right. And then for those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, or any other podcasting platform, please follow and give us a 5-star review if you can. Well, let's get straight into it then. We'll talk a little bit about Man United first. You've obviously got Xerxes we talked about on previous episodes. Obviously, I don't know if we need to talk that much more about that in terms of maybe some updates, but there are 2 new names been thrown into the ring recently. A couple of names that we'll recognise from previous seasons and links and so on. One of them is Ugarte, who I currently plays for PSG, right?
Yeah.
A very kind of old school throwback type of DM, known for his let's say controversial tactics. I think he fit in very well with Leacher the Butcher. And then a surprise one, Eric Dyer's understudy, Matthias de Ligt. So those 2 would appear to be edging closer to happen. What do you think about those ones, mate? We'll start with obviously Xerxes, Ugarte, and de Ligt. Who do you think there is going to be your favourite, and do you think that they're all starters in your team?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I won't chat about Xerxes too much because we have talked about him loads. And yeah, I would be really happy with him. I think he's kind of a throwback to what Martial it looks like it anyway from the clips I've seen. And I've said before, he kind of looks in that mold, not necessarily like a pure gunman type finisher, but more of a player who gets involved in the play. And I think we need that just to have a bit more variety. I remember you speaking a lot about Arsenal needing a bit more variety in their players so they can adjust how they play and stuff. And I think it's been a real miss not having Anthony Martial at least available to come in for certain games and rotate with Højlund this last season. So I'd be really happy with him. I don't think he would necessarily be a starter straight away. I do think I think it'll be a bit of a battle between him and Højlund, to be honest. And I think whoever performs the best will probably keep the shirt. With Ugarte, I like it. I think the only Uruguayan, or maybe the last Uruguayan we had was Eddie Cavani, and he was one of my favourite players when he was at United. I just thought his attitude was top. And he had that like South American grit, that stereotypically fiery nature, and he was when it comes to a finisher, he was top for us, and I think he helped everyone. I think the attacking unit looked better when Cavani was with us, and so if Ugarte comes in and does anything like that for our midfield, I'd be absolutely delighted because. Yeah, like you said, he's a bit old school. I do think he kind of unfairly gets just like broad brushed as like an enforcer, ball winner, and someone who sticks it about. He's decent on the ball. He gets it down. He's got a good touch, and he finds nice simple passes. And to be honest, I think that's perfect for what we need in that midfield. And it's a lot around, like you said, he's got an engine. He'll get around the pitch, and he's got youthful exuberance, which I think we need. We've been lacking because obviously, no offense to Casemiro, but he doesn't have those traits. Like he has a tackling, he has that kind of stuff, which I still think he's inherently pretty good at. But in terms of getting around the pitch, I think he was getting exposed like habitually throughout the whole season. Like you called it in the first game against Wolves. I remember we talked about it, and it was like, oh my god, he was just getting bypassed by Cunha, Huang. I think Mateus Nunes was still playing for them at that time. Even he was drifting past them. Like it was just non-stop. So I think setting up with someone in that midfield who will be able to, handle that kind of tempo and that kind of game, I think is great. And I think he'll, it's hard to predict how a partnership will work, but if I'm trying to imagine what the midfield would look like, I think we all would say Kobbie Mainoo's probably like his name's on the team sheet after last season. So we're looking for a partner for Kobbie. And I do think someone who's a bit more combative, someone who can get round the pitch, because I don't think that's Kobbie's greatest strength. Like I do think he could potentially get exposed as well when it comes to, that kind of covering ground element of his game. So I think Ugarte would be great. It'd be interesting what the fee is, because PSG, they spent quite a bit on him. So it'll be interesting to see what they want. I've seen reports saying it would be like between 30 and 40 million. If that is the case and he's on a decent contract, I'm super happy with that. Age profile works, style works, financials, seem like they work as well. The Delict one is super interesting. So I want to get your opinion on this too, because the Man U fan base one, and yeah, you're obviously going to add your jokes. Yeah, I get it. Dutch Harry Maguire, blah, blah, blah. I'll take it on the chin. No Diddy. But Delict, I've seen a lot of Man U fans are either going down that route of like he's not mobile, he's just a big Dutch Maguire, he's flopped at two big clubs. What we doing? But then other people have looked into his. I'm not Statman Dave, Statman Ant, or anything like that, but they look at his like attributes, and actually, it's a bit of an eyes. Is a bit deceptive on the eye type situation because he's not slow, and he's not necessarily moving like per Mertesacker in his retirement, moving like a bloody cruise ship taking 50 knots to turn left and right. But yeah, he's obviously not rapid, but I do think he could work. I think he's got the physicality, he's got the strength. He's good on the ball. Actually, his pass completion rates and stuff everything is super high. So it could work, but of course, I think the slight trepidation I have is that he's been at two big clubs and it's not really gone well. And it started with Italy, which has got no pace. It's now got to Germany, which has got a bit of pace, and now he's coming to England, which is like the most rapid, fast-moving version of football I think out there. So the evidence is not fantastic when he's been dealing with slower pace. So I'm open to it. I don't think it will be an absolutely stinky deal. I think it could work. But I understand why some United fans are a little bit, squeaky bum about it because it's a dodgy one. What do you think, man? Be honest with me. Get your jokes off and then be
I'm going to
honest.
talk about all of them. I think Ugarte would be a class signing for you. I think he's exactly what you need. I think people have kind of not misprofiled, but I think Cobby's real strength is on the ball. And I think people have realised that probably over the last half season and probably thought at the beginning he was going to be kind of just a good all-rounder, able to play the ball off and do kind of silky tempo dictating type of stuff. But I think we've shown that he's shown that he's able to do quite a lot more than that and is pretty good on the attacking side of the ball. So I think Ugarte next to him is a very good partnership. I think Ugarte will do all of that kind of dirty work that doesn't necessarily get the plaudits, but is really crucial to unlock the ability for Mainu to do what he needs to do, and particularly to unlock what Bruno needs to do, right? And we've just obviously watched the Portugal game against Slovenia. He was spraying balls left, right, and centre, and again, he can be really, really devastating to the opposition if you give him the time and you surround him with the right kind of players to do what he needs to do. So I think Ugarte smashes out of the park. 30-40 million. You got to say yes to that all day long. On Delict, I'm less convinced. I think depending on the fee, it could be a good signing. I think he's not terrible. He's still young. I think he's got a lot of, in my opinion, throwback type of capabilities that would work in a different time, but maybe he doesn't have some of the things that are required to be kind of that modern all-round type of centre-back that we're asking for. But I think if you pair him well with Leacher, I think that will cover up some of his deficiencies, right? I think one thing I've noticed about him is that he's not really a front foot defender. Like, he's not going out there and trying to go and get the ball. He's got pretty poor stats when it comes to tackles won. He's got pretty poor stats when it comes to blocks and stuff like that. He's not great at interceptions, those kinds of things. But he is really good in the air. He is pretty good when it comes to, not getting dribbled past. He's, I think, a good kind of big defender, I'm going to call them, right? The big defenders to put next to somebody who's more mobile. So from my point of view, Leacher really does all of that kind of front foot defending. He's going to get involved, get stuck in, get people, try and catch people on the ball and so on. And I think if you put him next to Delict, it will cover up a lot of Delict's possible weaknesses. I do think, though, Delict, something about him strikes me as maybe not mentally strong enough to be able to lead a team. And I think all of this gas about him being like the captain and, the superhero type of defender, I think is a bit was really overdone previously. I don't think he's necessarily able to do that, and I think you've seen now when he tries to lead the line for Juventus or lead the line for Bayern, he's just not that guy. I think you need to put him next to somebody who's going to be a real gritty defender. I think if you stick Ugarte in front of him, even you're really surrounding him with the right kind of mentality for him to be able to kind of not skate along, but get his head down and actually focus on what he needs to do. And he kind of strikes me similarly to Varane in that Varane's not a massive personality. He's not the Roy Keane. He's not going to lead your team and motivate everyone and go crazy all the time. But he's really good at what he does. And if you give him the right tools around him, like the Sergio Ramos is, those kinds of players, he does a bloody job. He does a bloody good job of doing what he needs to do in the defense. So I think De Ligt could be a really good kind of replacement for him. I do think it's overbaked that everyone thinks that he is like a Harry Maguire regen and he's really slow and so on. I think he's a lot more mobile than Harry Maguire. I do think he will have similar issues though of just that size and that profile of player, where you're not going to be the most, the quickest off the line. You're not going to have the highest acceleration. That's not what you'd expect from a bloody a mahoosive defender. So I think he could be good, but if I go and see 50, 60 million for him, I don't know if it's worth the bang for buck is really there, because I think there are other options out there that don't have as big a name as he does, don't come from as big a club as he does, that you could go and get for a bit cheaper that would probably do a similar level of job. So we talked on the last podcast about are Man United fans ready to not have those marquee names and those marquee signings? I think Xerxes is in line with that, right? Not a marquee signing. Ugarte, I think, also is kind of in line with that. People know him, but he's not, blowing the, everyone's socks off. But De Ligt seems to be going back to that, we need to get a marquee name type of thing. And the only way I see it working is if you've got him cheap. And if you can somehow convince him to get his wages down or whatever else, right? I don't know what his wages are, but I'm going to imagine they're pretty decent being at Bayern and being a young kind of centre-back position. So, yeah, it's going to depend on the details. I think the devil will be in the details there. But I'm not massively against it. It could work out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I agree with most of that. I think he's made poor choices. And I think that, there is a trend alongside kind of all three of these players where they're on a bit of like a redemption arc. Like Xerxes was at the big club, didn't make it. He had to humble himself, go to like some smaller teams in Italy, Parmas and Bolognas, and do, kind of earn his stripes. Ugarte went for the big move to PSG. Didn't work out. Like that's obviously why they're trying to sell him. Back in the last season, he wasn't a first team player. So, there's that kind of, he's almost, he's going to be tarnished with the tag of he's failed at the big club. And now he's trying to, revive his career. De Ligt,
he's the biggest failure out of all of them.
De Ligt made a series, not just one mistake with his transfers. He made two. And this is really his kind of last chance saloon, I think, at a big club. If this doesn't go well, then I think the only way is not Essex but down. I think he's gonna be in trouble in terms of being at those big teams. So he should have never gone to Juventus. They had Bonucci, they had Chiellini that was still holding on to those positions, and they weren't like ready to vacate them. So him coming in off all the the part of the thing I agree on, it was that he was overhyped and overgassed as this like 18-year-old leader off of a couple of amazing seasons for Ajax. And I do think he was their leader, but I do think context was important in that team. Like, the way it was set up, the management, the league, everything about it was kind of like an Ajax under Van Gaal in the early 90s where everyone was young, everyone was like, so someone had to emerge and kind of, lead the team. It wasn't necessarily he didn't have the obstacles that a normal team would have, was where you've got some veterans and some, players of different ages that you've got to try and get all together. And at Juventus, I think he stepped into the worst possible situation. The club was in absolute turmoil, number one, right, with all the stuff that was going on around it and all the financial mess that it was in. And then positionally, he was not going to dislodge those guys coming off the back of winning a Euros. It was not going to happen. So I think he made a poor choice. He should have gone somewhere else. I think the Bayern move, on face value, I thought it was decent. But you're seeing what's going on with Bayern, right? He's chosen again another team that are going through a bit of turmoil, and they've got such strong leadership in there that it was always going to be, and aging players and stuff like that with big characters. It was always going to be really hard for him, I think, to kind of make it his own. So I think United might be in the right moment for him to come in terms of defence, right? If Harry Maguire leaves, because I've seen rumours of that, if Lindelof leaves, if a few people vacate, him and Martinez will kind of be the most experienced defenders in that crop. And along with Onana, will kind of be tasked with kind of, setting the spine of the team, and Nagate potentially, and, those guys that are coming in the team. So
but doesn't it strike you that he's gone for heritage clubs that have been in disarray, and now he's looking at Man United, which is another heritage club that's also in disarray?
Yeah, no. I mean, I get it. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic in saying and feeling like we've hit our rock bottom. They're making the right moves, and the hope is to come out of it. Like, I feel like there's an acceptance that we are in the mud, right? Like, I think the fans some deluded fans might not be accepting it. Some deluded fans still might not be accepting it and want the marquees, like you're saying, and all that kind of stuff. For sure, you can't convince the whole fan base, but I think a lot of people are very realistic about it. And you hear no outrage about Xerxes and Ugarte, like lesser names being linked. A lot of people are actually happy about that. So I think him turning up, even though I don't disagree with Mudded, we finished 8th. I don't know. It feels like the trend is hopefully going in different directions. When he rocked up at Juve and Bayern, this was pre-mud, or they were like just about slipping in the mud, and he had to go through all the drama. Whereas hopefully he's coming at a different point in our journey, and yeah.
Well, let's talk about that then.
We'll
a different point in your journey. Part of a different point in your journey is a man who's been battling gardening leave for the last flipping 6 months.
He's been building sheds as well.
Big old Dan Ashworth. Yeah, he's been in the shed just waiting for Newcastle to leave him alone. It looks to be confirmed now that he's going to be moving from Newcastle to Man United. I don't know what black magic you worked in the background to finally get Newcastle to agree. I'm assuming it's a decent bit of money. But what do you make of that? And are you happy to now have him kind of confirmed after this whole saga?
Yeah, so the hit squad's been assembled finally. Barada started today. Wilcox has been in position already for a couple of months. And now Dan Ashworth starts. They said immediately from the stuff that I read. So they've obviously settled and he's straight into it. So I'm happy, man. I'm not going to hear some of these deluded Newcastle fans now suddenly like every good thing that Newcastle did in the last 2 years was done by Eddie Howe or, the sheikh that owns their club or whatever.
It's copium.
It is complete, absolute copium. Like, I'm not going to say he's the genius like a lot of Liverpool fans. I'm aiming at everyone now. A lot of Liverpool fans talk about Michael Edwards, right? After Klopp's left, they've gone copium in the other direction. Newcastle, now Ashworth's gone, it's copium in the manager's direction. Everything was how all that Ashworth signing stunk, all of this, blah, blah, blah. The proof will be in the pudding, man. We'll see how good he is. His track record is certainly decent. So I'm just glad it's not the boys' club people. And I'm just glad you're going for people who could be perceived as best in class, right? Or at least their reputation around is that
you guys have got your own type of copium. I get it.
No, we do.
We've got the structure now, copium. Let's
see
if it works.
No, I'm not going to go that far. I'm saying we've got a structure. I'm not going to say it's the structure. This is better than Murto and
structure,
the bankers. Like we had the bankers. We had the bankers in before. So the fact we've actually got football people in now, that's a start. Now they've got to do the job. I'm not just going to celebrate this like some people are and breaking news. We've got the guy, blah, blah, blah. We'll have to wait and see, man. Like at the moment, the jury's out. Maybe Newcastle fans are right. Maybe they're just, copium. We'll find out. But I'm just glad it's done. I think to answer your question, it was the PSR stuff that helped us get this done, by the way, which Newcastle have done absolute madness on because they've sold like one of their youth players, Elliot Anderson, who looked decent, but 35 million. Oh my God. How have they managed to black magic that you were talking about earlier? That's black magic right there. And then they managed to sell a guy that they bought for 6 million last year and that
he hasn't played a game for them.
our mutual friend, one of our mutual friends supports Newcastle. He was at my house yesterday watching the England game, and he was telling me, "Oh, he's going to be this big player, and that's the one that he really was sad about." Meanwhile, I find out they bought him last season for 6 million, and he's gone on loan for 1 year, and that's it. And they flipped that to 30, and I'm like, if it wasn't Brighton buying it, because Brighton buying him is the only thing that makes
It's a
me
good
think
sign that he might
maybe
be good,
he's good, yeah,
Yeah.
because their scouts know things. But if it wasn't, if it was someone else like Elliot Anderson going to a random team for 30 million, I'd say that looks dodgy to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was the PSR stuff that helped us find a middle ground, that the compensation, that package that we were willing to pay, and because I think Newcastle were asking for something stupid like 15 or 20 million before. And I think we were offering like 2. So there's an absolute gaping chasm between those two numbers. So we probably found a place somewhere in the middle and paid it off.
And that's a good point to get onto the Arsenal stuff, because let's bloody hope that desperation continues so we can get Isak off them. Because I saw some weird comment the other day that said a Tottenham insider believes that Arsenal are confirmed to be going for Isak or whatever, which makes absolutely no sense to me. First of all, why would a Tottenham person know that? Second of all, what the hell has it got to do with him? But yeah, let's get on to Arsenal then. We talked about this a little bit in kind of our short conversation yesterday. It would appear that Arsenal are asking for some pretty crazy prices for a couple of our players, right? So Eddie Nketiah, not my favourite player. Not a bad player, but not my favourite player. It looks like we're quoting 50 million is our asking price for him. And then old Emile Smith-Rowe, obviously very close to a lot of Arsenal fans' hearts. We're quoting for 25 million to our interested clubs. So I'm going to comment on this one first, and then we'll get your feedback on it. I honestly think the Nketiah one is mental. I think 50 million for him would be amazing. If we could get 50 million for him, I would consider that to be the signing or the selling of the summer. I don't think you could. Yeah, I don't think you could ever get that kind of money for somebody unless you're Man City or unless you're fiddling with the books, which is also possibly allegedly what Man City have been doing. So I think that one's crazy. I think we should settle if we get 30, 35 million for him. If Elliot Anderson's worth that, I don't see why Nketiah is not. So if we could get 30, 35 million for him, I think that would be sufficient. I think 50 million is just really, it's basically telling the market that you don't want to sell him, which is, I really hope, not the direction that we're going with that. I think 25 million for Smith-Rowe, in my opinion, is actually crazy in the other direction. I know that he's got a lot of injury problems and he's obviously out of favour at Arsenal, and that kind of tells the market that we don't really value him all that much. But I think just based off of the fact that he's actually had a successful season in the Premier League already, and the fact that he's still so young and also English, I think he hits he ticks a lot of boxes, in my opinion, for a mid to lower table team in the Premier League. And we know these days that 25 million is not crazy numbers for them to swing. So I think actually, 25 million for Smith-Rowe, whoever cops him, I think that's a pretty good deal, because I think if you can keep him fit, I don't see why he can't become your kind of star player. Like, we've seen Ross Barkley become the star of Luton. We've seen, Morgan Gibbs-White becoming the star of Nottingham Forest. I don't see why, if you can't keep him fit, he doesn't become your star player if you're kind of, again, a mid to lower table team. So I think 25 million for him, again, if you can keep him fit, is a steal. So, I don't think we'll be able to actually fetch those prices, because I'm seeing crazy things recently about, the fees that people are willing to pay for Ramsdale and all these other players. For some reason, everyone's treating us as if, we're not deserving of money and we're just, Mr. Moneybags. So everyone's coming in with these really low figures. So I don't think we're going to get 50 million for Nketiah or 25 million for Smith-Rowe. For Nketiah, rightly so, but for Smith-Rowe, I think that I would be disappointed if I saw him leave for less. So that's kind of my viewpoint on it. But what do you think, mate?
Yeah, I mean, I agree on the Nketiah one. I mean, we've run banter and laughed about it, and I think the roundness of the number 50 million makes us think that's just bonkers. But if you take a minute to deep it and think what's actually been going on in the market, and
And
people,
it's a bad market for strikers, I will say right now.
yeah, the striker market is, we're starving, right? People are
Mm.
struggling out here. How starving people would be to have to spend 50 million on Nketiah is a different thing,
You've
but
got to be
people are
pretty
starving
hungry,
out
yeah.
here, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nketiah probably does look like, filet mignon right now to a lot of teams that are looking for a striker, and all they're seeing is a sea of Big Macs. So I get it. I don't think it's absolutely bonkers, but I do think it's probably slightly overvaluing him. You're probably looking at like around 30 million range. I think is quite fair, because he's scored a few goals in the Prem. He's shown that he can hack it as a rotational player for you guys, which means that he can make that step to being a first teamer at a mid to a lower table team. So I think 30 million is probably around what you might end up fetching for him, and I think that would be a decent deal. I think the Emil Smith Rowe one, I agree with your sentiment, but the reality is he's been crocked for ages, and that's what people. I'm not saying I agree with that justification purely because we've seen players who've had injury problems suddenly catch fitness and make comebacks, or fulfill their potential, etc. Right, so I think 25 million to 30 million would probably be a decent price to get for him. I don't think it's a mad snip purely because of that injury stuff. Clubs are going to factor that in. If it gets lower than that, under 20 mil, that's a bloody deal. That's bargain hunt deal. That's a really good deal for the player. And more than that, I think you've done amazing, because that injury record is probably what's completely stifled his Arsenal career. Because before his injuries, he was looking like, it was looking like you had two star boys. That's why the song comes in, and you've got Smith Rowe and Saka in it. So yeah, it's an interesting one. What would be great for you though, and it's no coincidence that these two are some of the players that are heavily linked, is PSR wise, this is a dream. Two
Yeah,
homegrown
pure profit.
lads, pure profit on the books. Even if you got 25 to 30 million for each of them, that's 60 million banked. And selling someone else. I was having this conversation yesterday. Selling someone else who's not an academy player, even if you sell them for twice the price, you have to spread it out over the years and factor in the previous transfer fee you paid and the wages. And by the time you've come out of all of that, you barely got anything that you can put on the books. So I don't like the way it's set up. I think it absolutely goes against what we're trying to do in English football and in any football game of football, and that's to create connections with players that feel like one of your
Homegrown
own.
talent.
Yeah, and to benefit, to create a system where it benefits clubs to flog their young players that they have invested in, and the fans as well have invested in Smith Rowe's case especially. It stinks, man. And so,
Yeah.
as much as I don't like all the clubs who are gaming the system needs to change. This is not one that we should encourage. Like, we've literally seen a cabal of teams selling their youngsters to each other for crazy prices. We know something's up. We know they're doing it to just fix their books. So they have to come up with something to fix it, because otherwise, we're all just going to be flogging all of our homegrown players, and you might as well just do away with academies. They're literally just a money making scheme. But back to these players. Let's see how it goes. I think you'll be good to sell them though, because I think it ultimately will help your team progress, and you'll get the players that you need if you do. If you don't sell them, I think it holds you back.
And I think, on the note of homegrown players and building up your talent, I do want to take a moment to, I guess, talk a little bit about Kevin Campbell. I do want this to be a bit of a tribute to him. Obviously, Arsenal homegrown talent, mate. He started his career as a trainee at Arsenal, ended up going on having like 150 plus appearances for us, a decent goal record as well. Did a lot from an Arsenal perspective, did a lot for the team, was really one of the core players in that team for quite some time. Obviously then went on to Nottingham Forest and Everton and became essentially an Everton legend just as much as he was an Arsenal one. And from everything I've heard about him, he was an absolutely stand-up geezer. So I do want to wish his family well, and just offer my condolences and just really hit home how important he was to football and obviously how great a person he was. So I do want to just take that moment for all of our listeners to remember Kevin Campbell, legend for Arsenal, legend for Everton. As much as it pains me to say that because I really hate Everton, we're thinking of him, and if we can get a couple more players like that through the Arsenal ranks, I'd be more than happy.
Yeah, no, I echo those sentiments, man. I've seen, obviously, we consume quite a lot of football content, and Kevin Campbell was everywhere, and he managed to stay relevant and contribute with like pure vibes and positivity and everything that I saw of him. He was always upbeat. He was always cheerleading. He was always supporting the team, even in some of the dark days. And it takes a lot of strength of character to do that. And there's a lot of people that have paid tribute to him since his sad passing a few weeks ago now. Literally everything has been just glowing references. People just, absolutely, raving about how much of a top bloke he was. So that speaks for itself as well and tells you what kind of person he was. And he got involved in this kind of content as well. He got involved with fan content. He got involved with lots of people of all different sizes and helped them, and gave his time and his energy to them, which also again is another sign of someone that's, you don't meet people like that much these days. You know what I mean? They're cut from a different cloth. So RIP to Kevin Campbell, and condolences to his family, his friends, and anyone that was close to him, because he was a legend. And people throw away that word around too easily as well. But for a club like Arsenal to pay tribute the way they did as well shows how much they cared about him. And Everton, I heard they did some big mural already in Liverpool to commemorate his life, and I'm sure they'll do something when the season kicks off. Both teams probably to pay their respect. So big up Kevin Campbell.